There is a form sitting on the VA's website right now. 3 pages, about 15 minutes to fill out. And for thousands of veterans, submitting it is the difference between owing the government money and owing nothing at all. Not a payment plan, not a settlement. Gone. Wipe. And the most painful part of this whole thing is that most veterans who qualify never file it because nobody ever told them it existed. They just look at the letter, feel their stomach drop, and start paying a bill they may not legally owe. So if you have opened an envelope from the VA that said, Notice of Indebtedness, or you got a copay statement for care you thought was free, or you're watching money get pulled out of your monthly compensation check to cover an overpayment you didn't cause, stay with me. Because in the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through exactly which forms do what, the deadlines that quietly kill your options, and one specific standard written into federal law that decides whether your debt gets forgiven. Everything I'm telling you comes straight from the VA's own published rules and its own form instructions. No hype, no secret loopholes, no paid service. Just the process the VA already has on the books and hopes you never get around to using. Here's how we're going to do this. First, I'll explain why you got the bill in the first place, because there are 2 completely separate VA debt systems, and sending your paperwork to the wrong one is the fastest way to get ignored. Then I'll cover the form that can cancel your copays for the rest of the calendar year. Then I'll show you the difference between disputing a debt and asking for a waiver, which people mix up constantly and lose thousands over. And at the end, I'll give you the big one, the form and the legal standard that can erase the balance entirely, even when the mistake was technically yours. Let's start with what actually happened to you. VA debt comes from 2 different houses that barely talk to each other. On one side, you have benefit, overpayments. That's when the VA paid you more than they decided you were owed. A rating got reduced, a dependent came off your award, your school reported a drop in credit hours, your pension income changed. The VA doesn't ask nicely for that money back. They send a notice, and then they start withholding it from your future benefit payments. That whole world is run by the Debt Management Center in St. Paul, Minnesota. On the other side, you have healthcare copay bills. Medical appointments, procedures, prescriptions. Those come out of the VA healthcare system, and they're handled by the Health Resource Center. 2 different offices. 2 different phone numbers, 2 different sets of forms. And here's why that matters so much. If you mail a copay problem to the Debt Management Center, or you call the health line about a compensation overpayment, you will spend weeks getting bounced around while the clock on your rights keeps running. Before you do anything else, look at your letter and figure out which one you're dealing with. Benefit overpayment, that's the Debt Management Center at 800-827-0648. Copay bill, that's the Health Resource Center at 866-400-1238. Write those down. You can also log into va.gov and go to the Manage VA Debt page, where every legitimate debt in your name will be listed. If a bill doesn't show up there, be very careful, because scammers target veterans with fake VA debt notices constantly. Now, let's talk about the copay side, because this is where the quickest win lies. The VA decides whether you owe copays based on your income from last year. Think about what's wrong with that. If you lost your job in March, if your hours got cut, if your spouse stopped working, if you got hit with a wall of medical expenses, the VA is still billing you based on a version of your life that no longer exists. And it will keep billing you that way indefinitely until somebody tells it otherwise. The form that tells it otherwise is VA Form 10 to 10 hours. It's called the Request for Hardship Determination. What it does is ask the VA to stop using last year's income and instead look at your projected income for the current year. If that projected income falls substantially below the VA means test threshold. Because you lost income or your deductible expenses went up, the VA can make a hardship determination. And when they grant it, you get moved into Priority Group 5, and you are exempt from hospital and medical care copayments. effective from the date you submitted the request through the last day of that calendar year. Read that again, because there's a trap in it. The exemption starts from the date you submit, not the date your income dropped, not retroactive to January, from the day the form lands. Every month you wait is a month of copays you're eating for no reason, and it expires at the end of the calendar year, which means if your hardship continues, you file again for the next year. One more thing to be aware of. The hardship exemption generally applies to medical care copays, and pharmacy charges can be treated differently. So ask the Health Resource Center specifically about your medication copays when you call. If they deny your hardship request, they're required to give you VA Form 10-0998, which explains your rights to seek further review. A denial is not the end of the road. It's the start of a different one. Now, before you file anything at all, there's a question worth asking. Should you even be paying copays in the first place? Because a lot of veterans are getting billed for care they were never supposed to be charged for. If you have a service-connected disability rating of 50% or higher, you generally don't pay copays. If you're rated below that, care for your service-connected conditions is generally free, even if other care isn't. Former prisoners of war, Purple Heart recipients, Medal of Honor recipients, veterans the VA has determined to be catastrophically disabled, veterans receiving VA pension, veterans whose income falls below the national threshold, and veterans covered under specific exposure and combat-era enrollment provisions may all be exempt from some or all copays. If you are in one of those groups and you're still getting billed, that is not a debt. That is a billing error. And billing errors get fixed by disputing, not by begging. Which brings me to the distinction that costs veterans the most money, and almost nobody explains it clearly. Disputing a debt and requesting a waiver are two entirely different actions. A dispute says, "This is wrong, I don't owe this," or "the amount is incorrect." You dispute when the VA made a mistake. Wrong dates, wrong amount, a dependent who was actually still enrolled, care that should have been exempt. Disputes are time-sensitive in a very specific way. Your first debt letter lists a time limit, and if you contact the VA within that window, you can avoid collection actions while they look at it. Miss it, and the machine starts moving while you argue. A waiver is completely different. A waiver says, yes, this debt is technically valid, but making me pay it would be wrong. Those go to different reviewers and follow different rules. And confusing them means your request gets processed as the wrong thing and denied on grounds you never got a chance to address. Now, stay with me here, because I've saved the most important part for last, and it's the part that sounds too good to be true until you read the actual law. There is a legal standard that can erase a valid VA debt, a debt you really do owe where nobody disputes the numbers, and the words in the statute are not financial hardship. There's something much broader and much more human than that. The form is VA Form 5655, the Financial Status Report. It is the single most underused document in the entire VA system. You use it to request three things: a waiver, meaning the VA forgives the debt outright, a compromise offer, meaning you propose a smaller lump sum as full settlement, or an extended repayment plan longer than 5 years. You lay out your income, your household expenses, your assets, your debts, and critically, this is the step people skip. You attach a separate letter that uses the word waiver explicitly and explains why you should not be held responsible. Here is the standard the VA applies. By law, a debt can be waived when collecting it would be against equity and good conscience. That's the phrase. It's in the statute. And it is not just about whether you can afford to pay. The reviewers look at who was at fault in creating the debt, and if the VA's own error caused it, that weighs in your favor. They look at whether collection would defeat the purpose of the benefit in the first place. They look at whether you'd be unjustly enriched by keeping the money. They look at whether you changed your financial position because you relied on those payments. You signed a lease, You bought a car, you enrolled your kid in school because the VA told you that money was yours. And they look at undue hardship. The decision is made by a body called the Committee on Waivers and Compromises. And yes, you have the right to request a hearing. Now here is the deadline, and I need you to hear this one clearly. You generally have 180 days from the date of your first notice of indebtedness letter to request a waiver, not from when you noticed it, not from when collection started, from the date on that first letter. If you're sitting on an envelope you haven't opened, go open it right now and look at the date, and understand what happens if you do nothing. Interest and administrative fees accrue. The VA begins withholding from your monthly benefits, and eventually the debt gets referred to the U.S. Treasury, where they can seize your tax refund, garnish non-federal wages, and report the debt to a federal credit system that can block you from getting a VA home loan. Ignoring it is the only option that guarantees you pay. The form itself is free. You can submit it online at va.gov, download the PDF, or mail it to the Debt Management Center at P.O. Box 11930, St. Paul, Minnesota, 55111. And if the paperwork feels like too much, and it is a lot when you're already stressed, a VA-accredited Veterans Service Officer will help you build the entire package at no cost. Not a fee-based company, an accredited VSOC. They do this every single day. So let's bring it home. 5 things. 1, figure out whether your debt is a benefit overpayment or a copay bill, because they go to 2 different offices. 2, if your income dropped this year, VA Form 10 to 10 hours can exempt you from medical care copays for the rest of the calendar year, but only from the day you file it forward, so don't sit on it. 3, check whether you were ever supposed to be charged at all. Because a rating of 50% or higher and several other categories carry copay exemptions, and a wrongful bill gets disputed, not paid. 4, know the difference between a dispute and a waiver and use the right one. And 5, VA Form 5655 with a written waiver request is the one that can erase a valid debt entirely, judged against whether collecting it would be against equity and good conscience, and you generally have 180 days from that first letter to ask. You served. You did what was asked of you. A letter from a computer in Minnesota does not get to be the final word on what you owe. There is a process, it is written down, and it exists specifically for people in your situation. Use it. Now I want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me what your letter said, how much they claimed you owed, what they said caused it, and whether anyone at the VA ever mentioned a waiver to you. I read these, and I promise you, the veteran scrolling this comment section at 2 in the morning, wondering if they're the only one, they need to see that they aren't. Tell them.